mind saying a few words, and we'll, in fact, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd each say your name and spell it for me, that would help.
Okay, well, I'm Douglas Caves, Douglis, C-A-V as in Victor, E-S, and we're down here from Wisconsin for the FATAGS event this weekend.
Okay, great.
Sherry Cannon Caves, SHERRY-CANNON, then Caves, C-A-V-E-S, and originally from Bartlesville.
Okay, thank you.
Doug is originally from Muskogee.
So that's where we're going to start here then. So I'll kind of, I don't know if you want to alternate back and forth who gets the first reply or not, but the first question is, where did you grow up? And share what you'd like to about your background before attending Oklahoma State University.
Well, I spent my time growing up in Texas, Louisiana, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And high school and middle school was in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Wanted to go to TU, but my parents said no.
Mm-hmm.
So I came to OSU, and as it turns out, I'm glad I did.
And why had you traveled?
My
to those
dad worked
states?
for Phillips Petroleum.
Okay. And that's why you ended up in Bartlesville then?
Yes, and during that time, he worked on the offshore drilling when it was beginning.
Mm-hmm.
At that time.
Okay. And Doug?
Okay, so my entire childhood was and youth was in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And my family was in the manufacturing business in Muskogee, so we were there. And when it came time to go to college, I was the oldest in the family. And for whatever reason, my parents thought it would be a bad idea to leave home, and so they very much wanted me to go to the college in Tahlequah. I forget what it was called, but
Northeastern, I think.
Northeastern, that's it, yeah, Northeastern. They very much wanted me to go there, and after a great deal of discussion, I managed to persuade them that it would be a good idea to come to Oklahoma State, and so that's how I ended up here.
And you say the oldest, so how many siblings did you have?
I'm the oldest, yeah, and I had two siblings by the time they came along, which was only a couple years later. My brother went off to Texas to Rice University, and my younger sister, after that, went off to Stevens in Missouri. So I guess I was the path breaker in leaving home, and it opened the floodgates at that point.
And nobody went to Northeastern?
Nobody did.
And Sherry, did you have siblings then also?
I have two younger sisters.
Did any of them attend?
No.
Okay, all right. So you've kind of answered this. Why did you come to OSU? So you knew you didn't want to go to Tahlequah, perhaps.
Yeah.
Was OSU just your? Do you have friends who were coming here, or what brought you to here then?
Well, interesting. My mother had graduated from OSU, and my father had attended here for a short time. He actually graduated from Oklahoma University, but they seemed to have a very strong attachment themselves to Oklahoma State. So, and I did have friends coming here, and it just seemed like the place to go. And the idea of going beyond Oklahoma to an out-of-state school just never even entered my mind. So this is where I landed.
And Sherry, you said you wanted to go to Tulsa University.
For no particular reason. I don't think I have any good reason.
Okay. So was OSU then just also fairly close? Friends?
I think it was more that probably my friends were coming here. Yeah. And that's probably why I wanted to go to TU to do something different.
Okay.
That's probably it.
All right. So when were you here?
Let's see, well, we both came here in 1965.
Okay.
So 65 through 69. Yeah.
Spring.
So you both made it through in 4 years. And what were your majors?
Good question.
Well, mine is the simplest. Mine was humanities, so Spanish and anthropology. You could do a triple like that at that time, and it was called humanities.
Okay.
And I started out in physics when I took Dr. Winter's class in electronics. Became very good friends with Dr. Winters, and he advised me he thought I had a great future, but not in physics. And at that point, I did switch to biochemistry, still thinking science must be part of the future somehow. But by the time I was a senior, I was really taking completely economics courses. I had enough biochem credits to graduate, and so I switched to economics in effect, and that's what my postgraduate work was in. Graduate work, I should say. Yeah.
Were there other faculty that had an impact on you or impressed you that you remember?
Sure, but do you want to answer that first?
Well, I might just, of course, in this discussion of the major, the reason Doug didn't just switch to econ, which is what he decided he really liked, was because of the draft. You couldn't do that. I mean, if you did that, you'd get drafted. So you had to graduate in biochemistry. Let's see. Oh dear. Well, Dr. Ospavat was...
Alexander Ospavat?
Yes, I took a history of science class from him that I really, really liked. And I was very impressed with him. We both knew Dr. Cummins, Richard Cummins, and he was a kind of a mentor, I think you might say. And I'm sure there were other people, but, well, of course, Margaret Brooks was someone that, Doug was in the honors program, and because I was his girlfriend, I was kind of a tag-along on things that they did, so I was exposed to her as well. So that was good. Maybe some other names will surface, yeah.
I also had Dr. Ospavat's history of science class.
Yeah,
So.
and I love that whole topic.
So,
And then, well, I mainly remember, but I've forgotten names, but professors in the economics department. And Richard Leftwich, I believe Sandmeyer.
Robert Sandmeyer?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm a little uncertain which of these I had in undergraduate, in my last year of undergraduate school, and which I did come back here and do a master's degree after we had been out a couple of years. So we were back here for a short time, and I was taking complete economics at that point. So Leftwich, Sandmeyer, and then, oh gosh, there were a couple of others I was quite close to whose names escape me at the moment, but really good instructors and challenging.
So you couldn't change your major, so how did you...
Well...
how did you work with that so that you could finish in 4 years?
I graduated with a degree in biochemistry, which at that point I intended to never use. Okay. But when we were seniors, we got married during the spring of our senior year. And then we, a longer story, but we applied to go into the Peace Corps, which we did, and spent 2 years in Africa in the Peace Corps.
Where in Africa?
In Malawi.
Malawi, okay.
And then came back here where I started graduate work. And at that point, I declared, I worked on a master's degree in economics, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Sierra Leone, West Africa.
Sierra
Oh, wonderful, yeah.
We'll have to talk about that afterwards.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, great. So what on and off campus activities did you become involved with? So I'm looking for things that you did both on campus and then maybe other groups or organizations you were involved with off campus.
Well, we met at the Wesley Foundation, and that was, I've always thought, for me, perhaps especially, that was a very fortuitous involvement. I really felt my education centered at the Wesley Foundation in terms of just kind of opening the window to what was possible, but also what was possible for me, to put me in the picture. There was that personal involvement and leadership to a certain extent that was very important. So Wesley Foundation, I had a role, I can't remember the official name of it, but for the residence halls, I did some programming, brought in some programs for that. I didn't, that wasn't heavy lifting, but for me at the time it was.
What residence hall did you live in?
Well, I was in Willard Hall.
Willard, okay.
But this was for all the residence halls. It would involve, the location might be one or the other, but the idea was to be programming for all the independents, I guess, in the halls. So that and Wesley Foundation.
Had you been a Methodist before you
Yes,
came here? Okay.
yes, I had been, right. I was also an assistant Girl Scout leader off campus for a couple of years. And that's all I can remember right now.
Okay, that's fine. And you, Larry?
Well, Sherry mentioned the Wesley Foundation. We were both involved extensively with that organization. On campus, I lived in Bennett Hall my first year and then moved to Parker Hall and was involved in the I don't even remember the names of the organizations, but kind of the groups that ran various activities for the residents in Parker Hall and organized events and so forth. And then there was the group more campus-wide that I got involved with was the one that invited speakers here. And the forum it was called, yeah. I don't know if we had any real structure, but that's what we called ourselves. So that was a major on-campus activity, and that led me to get involved in student government, both the student senate and eventually served as president of the student body.
Okay. What year was that?
That would have been 68, 69.
So your senior
year.
Senior year, okay. The Wesley Foundation, Reverend Bill, what was Bill's last name?
Bill Moore.
Bill Moore. Was he part of the reason why you were involved with the Wesley Foundation, or were there other individuals?
Actually, I would say we were here the last year of Van Zingelman and Carl Caskey.
Okay.
And I would say that dynamic was magic.
So before Bill?
It was before Bill.
Okay.
And then, of course, they, with the help of Dr. Cohn, we understand, were fired or moved on. And after that year, and then Bill came in, and he was of a different style than those two, and didn't have the Ecumenical Institute grounding, that's not quite, influence, I guess, that those fellows did. But at the same time, he was broad-minded and very supportive, and I know now more than I did then that he was really making a difference in quiet ways. And after we left, I think that really strengthened. His role was very important. Yeah, but the first year was Carl and Vance.
And of course, Dr. Comm, who became president in '66, was a member of First United Methodist Church here. So,
Yes, right,
okay.
right. And I should, one thing I just remembered is I was in mortar board,
Oh, okay.
whatever that's worth.
Yeah. It's helpful. So were you involved with the production of The Drummer at all?
Not myself.
Okay.
No, we were in touch with the people producing it and discussed matters with them, but
Didn't help with production?
We weren't part of putting it out, no.
Okay. So you mentioned the Speakers Bureau or the,
Yeah, the forum, right.
So
right.
what is your involvement with the Speakers Bureau and the eventual Speakers Policy, which is kind of a catalyst for many of the things that we're talking about? What do you remember from that experience?
Oh, it's hard to remember a lot of the detail, but I remember our involvement was first was just putting together a list of speakers, people that we might invite, and getting out the invitations, and I was, as a young person at that time, I just remember being really impressed at the caliber of people we have access to, that we could talk to and would respond to an invitation and be willing to come to OSU. And in some cases we didn't succeed in getting them here because there were objections by administration here on the campus.
So what do you think, why do you think there was that pushback from administration for certain speakers?
I think it was because they didn't like what those speakers were likely to say.
And they were very explicit about it. I think probably you could not invite an atheist and you could not invite a communist. They were very explicit.
Okay. So are you familiar with the John Kenneth Galbraith event? So what do you remember about that event? Or non-event, I guess. It was kind of a combination.
It turned out to be an event.
Well, as I recall the event, he had agreed to come, and this was going to be a big event. We had a big draw for that one, but when through letters, I believe, and maybe a phone call, it was explained to him what was going on here about with censorship of other speakers, he withdrew his acceptance.
Well, not entirely. He, he said that he would accept if the speaker policy that the regents had put into effect was changed. And he would come the next free weekend that he had, and he would come for free. So.
Okay. But apparently that didn't happen.
If you're here, if you have a chance to be here Saturday morning, we'll have the drummers and we'll have his letter that he wrote.
Okay, that would be interesting to see that again.
I happened to review that lately.
Because my understanding was that the administration, he was a speaker they wanted. They had been nurturing that, trying to get him to come here. And then when he then refused because of the speaker's policy coming out of the regents, that now upset the administration. Thomas, is it Altizer?
Altizer.
Altizer. Now, he was, wasn't he a theologian?
Mhm.
But he had a book that was
God is dead.
fairly controversial. And wasn't that part of the catalyst for not inviting someone who was, quote, atheist or might stir?
Which he was not.
Which he was not,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Which is an
yeah.
illustration of the problem.
So there was a reaction then, not based on reason or knowledge, but based on perception.
Yes, and there was the opportunity for Dr. Calm and in certain political, well, many political parts of the state to just use a broad brush to incite real fear in the citizens about what was happening on campus and to their students. And most of the newspapers and the public support was very much behind limiting access to viewpoints.
I'll interject a little personal, but I think there was a very strong paternal instinct by our administration that they were charged with taking care of these young people
Yes.
while they were here, and didn't want the parents of the state to feel that they were exposing them to things they shouldn't be exposed to.
And quite a different attitude from the OU administration, to what was going on here. Quite different.
Okay. I'm gonna mention some other names. Some of these people may have come after you were here.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure,
about,
sure.
Speakers,
Please,
there
please.
was ironically
Oh, yeah.
an event where I was responsible for telling a speaker not to come. And I won't say the name of the person because I think I remember the speaker's name, but I'm not sure I would get it right. And I don't want to get it wrong, but it was another event that would have been a large event, and the speaker advised me ahead of time that he didn't feel safe on the campus and he could only deliver his talk if he were allowed to bring a gun on the stage. You know, not obvious, but in a handgun in his coat. And I thought about it and I said, no, you can't do that. And thank you for letting me know. And he said, well then, can't come. So that was the end of that one. And that was called off within, a few weeks of his appearance, so.
Let me mention some names to you, and you may or may not have any recollection. Timothy Leary.
Mm-hmm. That was early
Mhm.
on.
Okay.
That was one of the Altizer and Leary were the early ones that really upset everyone.
Okay. And neither of them showed up at that time.
No.
Okay. Adam Clayton Powell from New York.
Right, we were not
Yeah.
allowed to invite him.
I don't remember any details about
Yeah,
him.
that was during
But
the
I know
same
he was the
period.
name on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And as I remember, the problem was that well, I don't know, that he was communist, or that was, he could be communist.
Could be. Philip Berrigan. He was a
Berrigan?
Berrigan.
Berrigan.
He was a Catholic, Roman Catholic
Yeah.
priest,
Yeah.
active in the
Yeah.
anti-war
definitely.
movement.
Yeah, definitely.
He was on your list to invite?
I don't remember him being on the list,
Yeah,
but,
might have been later.
yeah,
Abby Hoffman.
I don't think he was on.
I don't think so.
He did arrive later, but I think he was after you all had completed your time here. Also with Jerry Rubin. Jerry Rubin was another individual. Dick Gregory.
Yes,
Yeah,
he came.
yeah. He came, didn't he? Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And any reflection or remembrance of his visit?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
There was a big crowd, if I remember. Yeah.
And then Stokely Carmichael. He also, I think he came after
I think
also.
He may have come after, yeah.
Okay. And then do you remember Sexpo 68?
Oh, sure.
Tell us about Sexpo 68, if you can.
What do I remember about it? I tell you what I remember as being so busy organizing these things that I have very little recollection of the content or what actually took place.
So maybe tell me about the organizational activities. So what would you do when you were trying to organize an event like this?
Oh, it was pretty standard stuff, It was find a place to hold it that would match the size of the crowd you anticipate, and a schedule that worked out for the university and the speaker, and then publicize it.
Would you hold these things off campus as well as on campus?
I think they were all on campus.
campus?
Well, there was one that we could only do if it was off campus. You could only do if it was off campus, and I can't remember who that was.
I don't remember any off campus, but
You know, a name you didn't give was Julian Bond.
Mm-hmm. So he remembered Julian Bond. I had that question for Melvin, but I'm sorry I left it off your sheet. I know later on, occasionally the Wesley Foundation would host. They didn't have the first floor. You could hold a decent sized crowd in there, and I know they had a few things where the activity wasn't allowed to be on campus, and they would allow something to be held at the Wesley Foundation. But this was a few years later. So in regards to the speaker's policy, which really fermented a lot of response in a variety of different ways, I think there was pressure on Dr. Kalm. Do you have any idea where that pressure was coming from? Do you have any thoughts on that?
well, yeah, it came from the broadly speaking, the citizens of the state, but it came through certain state legislators and through the Board of Regents of the university. I do recall one event when Chick Dambach and I and maybe a couple of other students went to meet with the regents at one of their meetings, and I just remember thinking at the time that, wow, these gentlemen don't have any idea what's actually going on the campus, and they don't have any idea about what is trying to be conveyed by inviting knowledgeable and involved speakers from outside the campus. It just didn't seem to be something they really even had as part of their world, part of the world that they conceived of for the university.
So do you think they had fear, or do you think they felt threatened, or do you think they was just outside of their experience?
I think my impression was that they really looked at the university as a place to train students to fit into what they saw as an agricultural economy, an agricultural state, where non-agriculture activity was carried out as a sideline to agriculture, and at least partly in support of agriculture, and there just wasn't any, it just didn't seem to even be part of their world to think about why someone like a Dick Gregory would be of any interest to anybody.
Of course, the other thing was the whole setting of the time, and I think there was a lot of fear of the kind of activities that were going on in Berkeley, both coasts really, and that there was going to be a poisoning of young minds here, and so the idea was to protect rather than to help people experience analyzing conflicting views and maybe being wrong once in a while and seeing what that was like. We were not really being treated as adults, or as almost adults.
Do you think,
especially women.
especially women? Do you think that they felt maybe that by inviting certain individuals to come speak, it might ferment protest or violence, or because they were seeing this going on the coast?
Yeah.
Do you think that was a fear that would happen here if we invited people in?
Yes, we would have the picnics on the lawn. You weren't supposed to be on the lawn, but we were on the lawn. And that was just the beginning. It was the slippery slope, thing. And so what was happening then is they were taking pictures and keeping files on people. And Doug had an experience, and I won't tell it for you, but when your dad was approached by the FBI.
No, not by the FBI. No, that's interesting, yeah. I suppose as background I would say that I didn't really think anything we were doing was really out of the ordinary. I did look at what was going on other campuses in terms of disruption, what was going on in Haight-Ashbury in terms of really alternative lifestyles. It really seemed pretty wild to me. But what we were doing here at Oklahoma State in terms of just inviting speakers didn't seem to me to be really even something that unusual, but it was stirring up enormous objection, and I was just amazed at one point when I went home for, maybe it was Thanksgiving, and was seated at the table with my folks and my siblings, and my father says, I want to tell you that my friend who is a FBI agent in Muskogee has told me that the FBI has a file on you. And I was disappointed to hear that. That's my father speaking about his disappointment. And I was just in a state of shock. Why would anything that we had done be of interest to the FBI?
My memory of that story was that the agent asked your dad if he wanted to see the file.
Oh, yeah, right.
And your dad said,
I think he said no.
He said no, he didn't want to see that. He was really, I think he was not sure that was supposed to happen.
So your dad was more concerned with the surveillance than he was with
He
your
was
activity.
concerned with that, but it did cause him to wonder if maybe we were involved in something more than met the eye, which we certainly didn't know about if we were.
When we told my parents that we were going to get married, nobody was very surprised about that, but we told them we were going to get married. My dad said, okay, well, that's good. Now, and then he started lecturing Doug about seeing his name in the newspaper and communism. That was what was more important.
Did you share that information then with your friends when you returned to campus, that at Thanksgiving or whatever it was, that you had found out that you may be under surveillance and that others may be under surveillance? Or did you suspect that beforehand?
Yeah, we knew there were files. They were out taking pictures. In fact, there's some of the newspaper cartoons are Yule Gay and the photos and
And he was head of the campus police department at that time.
Yeah, I think we were aware.
I don't think we knew that the FBI was.
So you knew there was surveillance, you just didn't know it reached the level of the
We knew stuff was going
FBI.
on, and I don't recall, but I wouldn't be surprised that people had mentioned FBI, but I don't think I took it seriously. And then when this happened, I thought, wow, it is serious. They are, for whatever reason, they're investigating what we're doing. Why should they be doing that?
Why do you think there was more concern perhaps about women or a woman's place or role? Can you talk about that a little bit? Because you said there were differences.
Oh, yes, yeah. But the changes that took place from 65 to 69 were incredible in terms of when I was a freshman, the hours I had during the week and the hours I had on the weekend, living in the dorm and public display of affection and being grounded if that were the case. If that was observed. It just, and then having to wear a dress when you went to the library. Anyway, it was just really.
So how did you know about these rules? How did you know what the rules were that you had to wear a dress when you came to the library? Was that written?
Oh, that's a good question. How did you know? I always wore a dress when I went to the library, so maybe
Well, they would ask you to leave.
Well, that could well be, but I didn't ever test it, so I don't know exactly.
I just didn't know if there was like a handbook that you were given, or was it just assumed that you would learn through other contacts that these are things you can do and these are things you can't do?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I mean, certainly the hours at the dorm,
That
that
was
was
very
pretty
clear.
obvious.
And it was different for men and women
Oh, yeah, men didn't have hours.
at all.
No.
And women had very restricted hours during
Yes,
the week and a little
I think
more
during-
flexibility during the weekend. Is that correct?
Yes, I think during the week, I may be wrong about this, but I think it was 8 o'clock, Monday through Thursday, and then 10 o'clock Friday, and then 12 o'clock Saturday, and then Sunday, I don't remember.
And when did it open in the morning? So do you
Well, I think that was wide open,
so
which I did take advantage of on occasion. Yes.
you were just an early riser that day.
Mhm, yes, yes. But by the time I was a senior, I think women didn't have hours.
And so
I
there
might
was,
be wrong. It might have just been that by that time, senior women didn't have hours. That could have been, but when I was a freshman, they did. Senior women did. And we weren't women, we were girls.
girls.
Yeah.
So in your perspective, things improved
Oh,
for
they improved and changed.
your status and roles and freedom on campus
Yes.
became more equal, perhaps not equal, but better than they were
Yes,
when you started.
and very quickly, really, when you think about it. Very quickly.
Why do you think it happened so quickly? I mean, why? What
I
was special
think-
about this time?
I think it was so very, I think that the change was everywhere, and and those changes made what was going on here look so antiquated. It just really highlighted that.
Okay. I'm going to mention some personalities of folks. One has already been mentioned, but I'd like, maybe if you can, to talk about him a little bit more. Robert Comm, he was the former dean of arts and sciences, and then he is named president of the college in 1966. What do you remember about Dr. Comm? Because he would have started the year after you got here.
Well, let's see.
As president, I'm sorry. He would have been here as arts and sciences dean, but taken over the role as
Well, he was the source of university authority. Ultimately things went up to him, and so I had only limited personal dealings with him, but I think we met once or twice when I was a senior, and it was clear to us that we didn't agree on I even forget what the issues were that we were dealing with at that time, but they had to do with rights of student government to decide certain things that he felt were best left to the administration to decide, and we disagreed on that. And he really liked to be liked. He liked to have students appreciate him, and but we just couldn't do that. You know, we had to disagree.
He reminded me a lot of my father. He really, I think the whole changing grounds, it was a fearful time.
So we were talking about Robert Kahn.
Yes.
And you said, reminded you in some ways of your father.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, well-intentioned, but not willing to trust in terms of my father, my ability to look at information and make a decision. He was fearful that I was going to do the wrong thing.
Well, and I think the link there is that Dr. Kahn really saw himself as running the university according to the way people like our fathers and the people of the state thought it ought to be, in terms of turning out a certain kind of person that was exposed to a limited amount of, a limited type of material. And the idea of the university as being a place of free and open inquiry, where people follow that inquiry wherever it takes them, was just not part of that view, and it wasn't part of his view.
And these are almost all men making these decisions. The legislature is men. The Board of Regents are men. The administration it's all men.
It struck me looking at those old clippings.
Oh, yeah.
And the pictures.
Yeah. George Grease, remember George Grease? He was once Dr. Kahn moved into the presidency, George Grease took over as Arts and Sciences Dean. But Abe Hesser, does that name ring a bell? What do you remember about?
Well, he decided that the ACLU was too controversial to hold their conference, I think, at the Union, and that was just amazing.
Yeah, he was the director, I think, of the student union at that time, and so I had full control or sway over that area, which was in part paid for by student fees for student activities and events, but it sounded like he had ultimate authority regarding that. Lewis Bullock.
Lou Bullock, yeah.
What was his?
He came after a little bit.
He may have been a little bit after you all.
I think
he was there
yeah.
while he was. Yeah, I think he was overlapped a little.
A little bit.
Yeah, I remember the name.
Yeah, so.
I believe he goes on to law school and becomes a lawyer, I believe. Frank McFarlane.
Boy, that's a familiar name, but I don't.
Yeah, that's okay. Dewey Bartlett was governor at the time, and apparently had some opinions regarding the running of the institution. You mentioned her earlier, Margaret Brooks. What can you tell us about? She was a faculty member. About Margaret, because Doug was in the honors program.
Yeah.
Do you remember her impact or influence?
Well, sure. I mean, she, her view was the university was a place of open inquiry and the pursuit of truth, and that there just weren't boundaries on what you should be allowed to look into and the kind of discussions that should be held. And so we really enjoyed meeting with her and discussing ideas that as a kind of, in a way that you felt like there weren't a lot of faculty with whom you could do that.
Do you know what impact these events had on her career here?
I was very vague about that. Until we had another reunion in 2006, and then I guess I did know, but I had forgotten
Yeah.
that she was forced out, really, and ended up at OCU, which is it's a good school too.
Mhm.
But she really liked the honors program.
Do you remember the sociology department? Did that happen while you were here?
It did, sure.
And so tell us a little bit about the events regarding the sociology department. Because neither of you were in the department,
No.
but you were aware of.
We were aware of it. Were we out of town when that resignation happened? Or-
I don't think we were.
Gotcha. You know, it was just a major event. I mean, everyone left. And
The whole department.
the whole department, and it was just gone. And that was, but it didn't impact us directly, other than being something that we saw as an indication of support for what we were doing. You know, if there were capable faculty members who were willing to say, well, if this is the way it's going to be, I can't be here, that to us was a validation of the way we thought things ought to be.
So you said you had the opportunity to visit with Margaret Brooks and feel some sympathy or understanding of what your vision of a college experience was. Did the resignation of all the members of the social department kind of reinforce that there may be other faculty who would also be
Sure.
supportive? You just hadn't had the opportunity to meet them. That it may be broader than just Margaret Brooks.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, Richard Cummings of the engineering department was very supportive and was advisor to the student senate, and we became very close friends with Dr. and Mrs. Cummings, and they were very supportive, right in line with the others. I've already mentioned Tom Winter in the physics department. And I know there were others that either we didn't come in contact with, or we have forgotten.
Sherry mentioned someone earlier, Alexander Ospavat was also very involved with the, what is it, the Association of Universities?
AAUP.
AAUP.
What I didn't know until our previous reunion was the price that some of these people paid for doing that. We just went on, we left and we went on, and that was that. But they didn't, and they really paid. And that was very sobering to know that.
Dr. Ospavat did not receive a raise for a number of years. Valuations were excellent, but no raise. Do you remember Dr. Ted Agnew at all? He would have been in the history department. He was also with the Association of Nursing College Professors. He was also a Methodist.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Do you know the name? I mean, Sister Jane Lukey in the English department. There was another person that was. I think she was helpful to Dr. Brooks, or maybe it was to the student government. I can't remember what the connection was, but.
We have hedges. Have you ever heard that some of the planting of hedges was a crowd control mechanism?
Oh, no.
Didn't know that.
Didn't know that, okay.
No.
I don't remember. There used to be hedges with thorns, fairly significant
Yeah.
thorns on them. And so I've never had this confirmed, but I've had people imply who had connections with the former physical plant and landscaping that they had planted these thorny hedges along sidewalks to prevent large movements of people from one area to another area. So I just didn't know if you'd ever heard.
I don't
anything
know.
about that.
I thought that they were just to discourage people from going on the grass.
Well, that was part of it too. Did the library lawn, was it a common gathering point, or it wasn't?
No.
You weren't supposed to?
You weren't supposed to be on the library lawn for the most part. And it was only when these Friday afternoon picnics started there and were more or less in violation of that policy that we thought, oh, it's kind of nice sitting here on the library lawn.
But when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, they had a memorial service that took place on the library lawn. When Dr. Kalm was installed as president, that ceremony took place on the library lawn. So there were events that could be authorized to be held there.
Yeah.
But they weren't, they had to be scheduled and pre-approved. And so, but you would gather on the lawn anyway.
We had in terms of the pre-approved gather, there were several times when I was a senior that I spoke to student body-wide gatherings on the library lawn. But like you say, those were approved. We had a process we went through, and people gathered on the lawn, and then there were other gatherings that were not approved. And they just happened.
Mm-hmm. Would the OSU police then show up? Any kind of intervention or not?
I don't ever remember it being confrontational.
Are you talking about the picnics in particular?
When the picnics, when people went on the lawn and they weren't supposed to be there.
Well, just the photographers.
Yeah, just, I don't recall any kind of enforcement.
Would students throw frisbees and
I don't
that kind of thing
remember
on the
that.
lawn, or was that kind of a sacred area that wasn't, you know?
Oh, no, I don't think that was common. Do you?
I don't remember that, no.
Someone else might
No.
disagree.
No, that's fine. Okay. So were you involved with any kind of protests or subversive organizations that you'd like to share or not?
When Dr. King was killed, there was a kind of a spontaneous march in sympathy for that. And in fact, I went and I bought black crepe paper rolls to offer to people to wear as an armband, old-fashioned way of showing mourning, but less old-fashioned than now. And so we marched on the campus, on the streets. And when we went by the fraternity houses, we were berated for that.
So you marched up University Avenue, or do you remember?
Yes, I don't remember the route.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't
No,
remember.
that's fine. But
And I don't remember how many people were involved. It was fairly spontaneous. But even showing that kind of sympathy was not popular.
And then when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, that was, I think, during the summer,
I think
wasn't
it was
it?
in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't.
Maybe
we
June.
weren't here, yeah. No, I think really other than going to some of the Friday afternoon gatherings on the lawn, and then there were a couple of larger protests, so to speak, where large groups gathered in response to the speaker issues, and we attended those, but there weren't really that many live protests going on here.
No, there really weren't. There was another kind of faction that I don't know, faction isn't quite right, but there's a group of SDS and so on who were, I don't even know if they tried anything. I don't know.
You never witnessed any violence during any of these protests? Weren't they fairly sedate?
Oh, they were very sedate.
I mean, in that people would...
People wore suits.
and they might go to a location, there might be some speakers or interaction, but there was no, I've never heard of any kind of threatening
No.
activity.
No, incredibly civil.
Mhm.
Yeah, but they were described sometimes as riots or inciting riots.
Mhm. In the state
Absurd.
newspapers.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
absurd.
Okay. Are you familiar or aware of any concerns by African American black students at the time? Do you think, were you involved with any of their activities or aware of their activities, or have any remembrance of that time for them?
I was struck coming back today, there are so many black students on campus, and that was not the case. It was a very small number of people that were black. So that's a very good difference. Now, we had our involvement at the Wesley Foundation in the coffee house,
Mhm.
which was in the basement.
Mhm.
I remember, I think it was Melvin Wade, who he said I don't know where the idea came from exactly, but as part of the program, I made a dress out of material that looked like canvas. And I'm not a seamstress, so it wasn't much of a dress. And he painted me in the dress. And so this is part of the performance. And he's painting what he says, I always wanted to paint a beautiful woman. So, hyperbole. But Melvin I remember he was involved in that. And in the coffee house to some extent, but I don't remember. I wasn't consistently there myself, so I'm not sure how much.
Did you know his ex-wife, Margaret, I think it was Margaret Williams?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
I may have the name
remember
wrong,
the name.
but, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. She was also here for part of her undergraduate work.
Okay.
And so, okay, you've already talked about the resident hall visitation and hour issue. Do you remember Kent State?
Oh, yes. We were
No,
in
that happened
Africa.
after we
You were in
left.
Africa, so
Yeah.
I think that was in '69, late '69 or early '70?
Yeah,
It would've
might have been 70.
70, I think.
Okay.
And we were just appalled. We thought, wait a minute, what country is that?
Let's see. So, one of the things you said, well, you didn't change your major, concerned with the draft. At the time, there was. Do you remember what your draft number was?
Well, initially I got a deferment to go in the Peace Corps.
Oh, okay.
So.
But before that would have been in '69.
Yeah.
They
The only
didn't
number I
do the
remember
time.
getting was.
So you didn't have the lottery when
They
you
didn't have the
when you
That
lottery
was-
until we were in the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was in the mid 180s or something like that. It was high enough that at that time it looked like I wouldn't be drafted.
Okay.
So the Peace Corps kind of got us beyond that.
Okay.
Kind of was the bridge from college, among other things, was the bridge from being here to getting a high draft number.
So, tell me a little about anything else you want to talk about during your years at OSU?
I think you were listing individuals there. Oh, one thing is that I think there's just a remarkable group of people here that were part of the reaction, the resistance, the creative energy that went into all of that. And I'm thinking of individuals, but all those individuals together, really amazing group of people, and most of them from right here in Oklahoma.
So you're referring to the gathering this weekend?
I am, but more than that. There would be 5,000 people showing up at, well, I don't know how many of those, not too many, at some of the gatherings. That's a lot of people, and they weren't all there because they understood it or cared about it, but at least they were interested and they showed up.
So to a certain extent, you felt some support
Oh, yes.
amongst the community, or, so even though there's pressure from certain voices in the state, you did feel a certain amount of support locally from either the Wesley Foundation or other groups and organizations or individuals who just were part of the...
Oh, yeah, and the student body in general, there were a lot of students who were off on the sidelines. They didn't care a thing about what was going on, but there was a large group, very large group, that were very supportive.
So I think that's worth noting.
Thank you.
They might not be engaged other than showing up for some of the larger events, but they were supportive.
Okay. And you think that changed during your time here? From your arrival, you mentioned the changes in visitation and those kinds of things regarding women. Do you think there was a change on campus during those years from 65 to 69? So the place you left was different than the place you arrived at?
Yeah, I think it was. When I'm always a little cautious about the time you're at a university is such a short period in the life of the institution that you wonder whether what you experienced was a different kind of 4 years or...
Well, we did come back for that year and a half after Peace Corps.
Yeah.
And of course, we were in a different strata at that time. It was just about a different world.
Yeah, it just seemed like the institution really changed from being one that really managed what students were supposed to do and think and say to one that was really fairly open.
Our viewpoint was so narrow and so limited. I really, really value the gathering that we're having this weekend because I'm seeing so much more in so much more depth than we had then, because our lives were, we were students and we were dating and we were in all these different pieces, so we just didn't have a full picture, and now we can have a better one and appreciate more how I think how courageous individuals were during that time. It's good.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes time and context to provide that understanding.
Yes,
that
and attention, and I don't think I was paying attention to that extent.
Okay. Any other comments about your time at OSU? Individuals or activities, events that you'd like to mention? Because I'm gonna move on. I've got a few more questions for you.
I would say that it was incredibly valuable, and it really did set the tone and the grounding for what's been important to me the rest of my life, and that's been now 50 years, which is a long time. But no, it was very, very important.
It passed quickly, didn't it?
Actually, yes.
So tell me a little about, or as much as you'd like, about what you've done after you left Oklahoma State University. So why did you decide on Peace Corps?
Because I wanted to go in the Peace Corps.
You wanted to go in the Peace Corps?
Ever since it started, I wanted to go.
Uh-huh.
So we got married and we went.
So how did you end up in Malawi, did you say?
Malawi. Well, you sometimes say we were going to go to South America, but we weren't. I wanted to go to South America. You wanted to go to Africa.
I just wanted to go anywhere.
Yeah, you mainly
You know,
wanted to go to
and
Africa.
when Sherry said she wanted to go in the Peace Corps, it's not as though I didn't. I thought it was a great thing to do.
Mhm.
And
But we thought with the draft, we weren't going anywhere. So that was a huge surprise to get a deferment.
So it did provide a deferment then. And what were your roles then as Peace Corps volunteers?
We were teachers.
Teachers, both of you teaching? At what level?
It would be secondary.
Secondary, so high school level?
yeah.
And what topics, subjects?
I taught the history of the British in India and English in the first 2 years. And this was teaching to the Cambridge certificate that the British would give.
The O levels?
The O-levels, I
Yeah.
think that's right. And, yeah. And that changed. 1 year, of course, we were there 2 years. In the second year, then we taught to the East African course, which was coming out of the unification of Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Uganda? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was going to be a new world for Africa. But then Idi Amin came in. But anyway, so the second year was totally amazing to me, totally different. I was teaching African history to Africans,
Mhm.
which was great.
And what were you
And I
teaching?
taught physics and math.
Physics, so teaching physics, huh?
And let's see, so the high school where we taught had a staff that consisted of an African headmaster, and then it was basically all American and British
And Canadian.
teachers.
There's one Canadian.
And one Canadian, and then there was an African who ran kind of the physical education classes. So it was
And this wasn't a boarding school, it was what's called a day school. But the students came from all over the country. And then they had to provide their own housing and food there. So they lived in an abandoned primary school building.
And then they would come over to the school to attend classes.
Yeah.
Were classes all in English?
Yes. English was the official language of the country.
Okay, and everyone spoke English as we are familiar with it, or were there
Yeah.
derivatives, I guess, sometimes? In some countries, they speak more of a pidgin or a Creole,
Mhm.
but I think in East Africa, I think their English was
That's
closer to
pretty-
English.
pretty
Oh, it was quite
just straight English. It had some British influence. So, and there were, occasional words from the African language that would be used,
Ujini.
as much by the Peace Corps as by the students, but, they would fit in.
Any Swahili because of Tanzania and Kenya?
Well, I think there was a little, but not
much.
as much. Yeah.
Okay. You stayed the full tour of 2 years. Was your
20.
training before in country or was in Malawi?
country. We were one of the first groups to train in country.
Okay. So you trained there and then had your tour, and then you returned to the States, and you returned to Oklahoma State University then?
We did.
Actually
yeah.
traveled for a couple of months on the way home.
Okay. Did you get a readjustment allowance while you were in the Peace
Yeah.
Corps?
They give you,
We did, $70 a month or something.
Yeah,
For each
something
month you
like
were
that.
there, and then you got it as a
So you spend that on your way home.
Did you travel anywhere between, did you come straight home or did you travel
No,
some?
we spent about
We spent 2 months.
several months
Yeah.
in Europe.
In Europe?
Yeah.
We went to Cairo. on the way back.
So then probably Cairo and then up in through
And
Europe?
Greece.
Through Greece,
Okay.
Yugoslavia.
Italy.
Yeah. Worked our way over to England, visited the people we had taught with in Africa. and then came home.
Then came home. Okay. And then returned to Oklahoma State after your travels and
Right.
finished then a master's degree.
See, I wanted to switch to economics, and I didn't think I was in a good position to apply to the grad schools I wanted to apply to with my biochemistry degree, and so I came back here to do a master's degree in economics first, and then applied to several schools and ended up at the University of Wisconsin for a PhD degree.
Okay.
So at that point, we left here, we moved up to Wisconsin, and to make a very short story, finished a PhD there, but on the way to doing that, got involved in doing consulting with my major professor, and we eventually set up a company and just stayed there. So I stayed there in Madison, and that company was my career.
What's the name of the company?
It was called Christensen Associates.
Okay.
We had about 50 to 60 consultants, economists and engineers, and worked in a variety of industries in economics and economics as it relates to engineering in some of them. And the company, I'm retired, but the company still carries on.
Any difficulty in the transition from having grown up in Oklahoma to living in Wisconsin? Or did that go fairly smoothly?
I would say that was very smooth, other than a little bit of shock initially at the amount of money we had to spend on warm clothing when we first moved up there.
And also, we were used to being liberal here, but we were conservative there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we got used to that.
Yeah, you got past that, so, okay. So, kind of to wrap this up, so, and you've kind of alluded to this, but, in fact, you've been very specific about it, but how did your life here at OSU impact the rest of your life?
Okay, I think the things we learned to deal with when we were here as undergraduates just gave us an approach to life in general. I mean, during that time, in your college time, you change from a high school student to a mature individual, and through the things we were exposed to at the Wesley Foundation and here with all the campus activities, the kind of decisions we had to make, the way we had to learn how to deal with all kinds of people, was just a great way to be prepared for whatever life might throw at you thereafter.
And in some regards, probably prepared you for the Peace Corps, too.
Yeah,
because
very
there
much.
are challenges and conflicts and adjustments in that transition.
Yeah.
I would say one of the things that a really valuable experience for me that the university gave me was I taught as a senior a freshman orientation class. And I think, I don't remember if it was 6 weeks or 9 weeks, but I would meet a group of freshmen once a week. And I don't remember how many hours, 2 or 3 hours, some period of time. Maybe it was 2, sounds like a lot. But the whole curriculum for that was mine to decide. Wow, that's amazing. When you think of this university who doesn't trust me to, manage my life to get home at a reasonable hour or not, but that was my job that I got to do. I think I got paid minimal amount, but that was just fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it because I had to decide what these freshmen would need to know to get the most out of their college experience. And that helped me understand what I got too. And they seem to enjoy the class. So,
Okay. Any final comments or thoughts?
Well, I think it's been amazing the way the group that we're here with this weekend has, I wouldn't say we've stayed in close touch over 50 years, but over time we continue to get back to each other, and there's a bond that goes back to our time in college and to the experiences we had that is really quite significant and quite valuable.
I think that goes back to the kind of people, the quality of people that were here.
You know, is it Friday afternoon tea and Glee? Is that the
That's
term?
it. Friday afternoon tea and Glee Society.
Society. And why was that moniker selected? Any idea?
Maybe someone else knows that.
Well, I think that was, there was some, you had, if you were going to be an official group on campus, you had to apply for status. And there was a group that had that name, and they had no longer, they were gone, they didn't use it any longer. And somebody decided, well, this is what we would use to have the picnics and so on, and we would have a name.
So it didn't mean anything.
There was no membership, there was
No dues.
description.
Didn't try to.
There
No
was
initiation.
No initiation, there was no theme song, no.
Secret handshake? None of that?
Right, there's-
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it does seem like a wonderful group of people, and I felt myself fortunate to be able to at least talk to several and then to meet you today. So I need to kind of sign off. This is David Peters. It's September 14th, 2017, and we're concluding the interview now. Thank you.